What attracted crowd to the remote village of Dombes during the life of the Curia of Ars was that they would receive the forgiveness of God and the sacrament of confession.
One day, a great orator in Notre Dame Cathedral finished his homily, and one of his listeners came up to him to say, "Well done, congratulations. The people were even climbing on top of the confessionals to hear you speak."
La gente estaba hasta subida encima de los confesionarios oyéndote.
But the orator, since he was humble, even though he was brilliant, said, "Yes, I may have them climbing on top of the confessionals, but the Holy Cure of Ars gets them inside the confessionals."
There are two moments in which the priest is irreplaceable. We can be replaced in many circumstances, but there are two things in which we cannot be replaced: in the celebration of the Eucharist and in the forgiveness of sins.
One of the most important parts of my life as a priest is confession, in which I experience firsthand the power of the Holy Spirit that consoles, that purifies, that washes clean.
The crowds of penitents who, in his lifetime, traveled to Ars were attracted as if by a magnet to the figure of this priest, because they knew that by confessing their sins through St. John Vianney, they were going to the very source of mercy and forgiveness.
One of the most important ministries of the priest is the ministry of penance, of confession. It's not simply another aspect among many. Rather, it forms an essential part of the priestly ministry. The priest's assistance is precisely an assistance in reconciliation, an assistance that offers pardon and mercy, that makes Christ present, because he did not come to condemn the world, but to save it, so that the entire world could enter into the mercy of God.
Sometimes a line of people waiting to go to confession with him went out the church door and rapped several times around the church building. He could read consciences. He encouraged them all in their duties, in fulfilling the commitments of their state in life. He was a man who guided consciences by helping them emerge from scruples, pusillanimity, and pride.
De los escrúpulos, de las pusilanimidades y de la soberbia.
In his life, we see how, before all other pastoral plans, the priest's fruitfulness depends on his union with Christ, and he put forth all his effort to seek this through prayer and penance.
For a priest to bear lasting fruit, it is important that he remain deeply united to the vine, which is Christ.
The priest, just as St. John the Evangelist laid his head on Jesus' heart, the priest should rest his head on the door of the tabernacle. We could say, listening to Christ's heartbeats in the Eucharist, and precisely there, he will find resources beyond all imagination.
Trova delle risorse assolutamente inaspettate.
Every priest, each and every one of us, is called to rediscover what is essential in our life and ministry, above all in a cultural context, in which there is the risk of becoming overly involved in many things, the risk of activism, the risk of becoming absorbed with what is not at the heart of the identity of the priestly ministry. The Curia of Ars, with his example, reminds us of what is essential.
Il ministero del sacerdote. Il curato d'Ars con il suo esempio ci riporta all'essenziale.
His day always began with 2 hours of prayer. He would kneel down before the tabernacle and spend 2, 3, 4 hours in prayer, asking the Lord, "Lord, convert my parish."
The key to faithfulness is first prayer. The priest is called to be an alter Christus, to be another Christ. And if he doesn't know the person of Christ, then he's never going to be effective, he's never going to be happy, he's not going to understand where the core and the center of his whole being is, that he has been sacramentally conformed to.
Jesus was a man of great prayer, and the priest must also, in this way, be a man of prayer.
Divine love matures in the same way human love does. People seek one another, find each other, meet, and then love one another. So it is the same. We seek the Lord in the Gospel, in His presence in the Eucharist. We spend time before the tabernacle. That was where the Curia of Ars found the solution to all his problems, in his loving dialogue with Christ. He was a person who had fallen in love with Christ, as all of us priests should be. This is how divine love matures, getting to know Him more, loving Him.
I would like to recall these two expressions of the Curia of Ars. There, where the saints pass, God goes with them. And the priesthood is the love of the heart of Jesus.
I would say that this quote from the Curia of Ars, that the priesthood is the love of the heart of Christ, is not only mystically but also theologically perfect. Divine love is a mystery of God. We could say that He loves us so much that He can't be alone. Of course, technically speaking, this is a theological heresy, but I mean to help us understand. And that is why He makes us participate in this love for all.
The priest has to be a living sign in a society that tends to live as though God does not exist. A living sign that He does exist, that there is something beyond this life, that there is a Christ who is the incarnation of God, who so loved mankind that He became God with us. And He should show this as well in His clerical garb, on the outside.
Clerical garb expresses the priest's belonging to Christ and to the Church. This is why I believe every priest should take delight in wearing clerical garb, to affirm the fact that he belongs to Christ and to His Church.
It is also a manifestation of love. Someone who loves is not afraid to show his love. I would encourage all of my brothers in the priesthood never, under any circumstance whatsoever, to hide the fact that they are priests.
Faithfulness of Christ, faithfulness of the priest.
The key to the priest's fidelity is to be with Christ, being with Him in a radical way, and being aware that the heart of all apostolate is divine intimacy.
You have to be free if you're going to be faithful. And you have to be free if you're going to love. You cannot love without freedom. And that's why the priestly love is so important today. But it's possible only if we live our calling to a celibate life.
Oftentimes, priestly celibacy is referred to as something extremely difficult, as something negative, as something purely disciplinary. But this is completely false.
Celibacy is not an ecclesiastical law. It is a demand of love. The ecclesiastical law is only a consequence of this, because the laws are consequences of theological and spiritual premises.
It is a joyful affirmation of love. It is a complete donation of one's own life, time, feelings, thoughts to Christ, in order to say, someday, like St. Paul, perhaps sooner than we think, insofar as I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who has loved me and given Himself up for me. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
The logic of divine love, of Christian love, is always, always, and forever.
Priestly celibacy is a gift, not only to the Church, but to the world, because it's a sign, a living sign in this world that would like to live without God. It's a sign of love. It's a sign of attention. It's a sign of undivided care and concern. It's a sign that opens itself to the transcendent dimension. The world is not enough to say that I love you. Celibacy becomes not only an act of love for the world, but also a sign of hope for the world.